Those doors, I'm a fool for your love.
Hey guys, got a very exciting guest tonight by the name of Kale Brock. Kale is a writer, producer and a speaker. He's behind the Gut movie and the longevity film, two really incredible projects. So I'm going to get him in now. We will get... Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How's it down there in little Melbourne?
You know, it's an interesting time down here. pretty crazy next 6 weeks we're in for, but hopefully this is part of the end of it for us and we can get a little bit of normality back.
Yes, of course. That would be great.
Yeah. How are you going? Where are you based at the moment?
I'm in Avalon, so I'm in the northern beaches of Sydney. So throughout the last, I guess, 6 months or more, it's been somewhat normal. There have been some slight hiccups to the normal routine, but we've been pretty lucky. The weather's been great. The surf has been absolutely unreal. So it's been not too bad to be grounded in one place.
It doesn't take much to realize you're an avid surfer.
No.
Onto your Instagram.
Yeah, it's a big part of my life. It's been that way for the last 18 years.
I think we should get straight into it. I have so many questions I could ask you. I feel like I could chat to you for hours, and already I've gotten so many amazing messages from people so excited to hear you speak. I think what you do is amazing, and the messages that you're sharing are really important, and you know, you're doing some really cool stuff as well. So for those who don't know much about Kale, he is behind the Gut movie, which is all based around the gut microbiome and finding the ultimate microbiome, where you travel to Namibia and worked with the Sands tribe, or lived with the Sands tribe. How is that for you?
I mean, it was when you read it back and you look at it in retrospect, it seems a lot more intimidating than what it was. It was an incredible experience, once in a lifetime, hopefully maybe twice or three times in a lifetime, but it was absolutely incredible. An amazing experice.
A year later, you created the longevity film and directed, right? A really short time span.
Yeah. So in doing so, I actually shortened my own lifespan. So
that happens. Now you're going to fit all those credits back up.
Yeah.
So I guess, you've been kind of in the health and wellness field for the past decade, and it's very obvious to me that you have, such a deep passion for true health, true happiness, and living the optimal life. Where do you think that passion stemmed from?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it starts with determining what an optimal life is, or what success means for you, and that's the thing. It's individual. And I guess I was quite lucky early on I was probably influenced into realizing that, and I don't know particularly who, but it was always, my parents always said, well, you've got to be happy. Whatever you do, you've got to be happy. And I remember, I guess one point I was playing AFL when I was 16, I was playing Aussie rules, and I probably could have gone down that route as a career choice, but I just wasn't that much into it. And I remember the head football coach at our school said, what do you want to do? And it was the first time I'd been asked, hey, what do you want to do with your life? Yeah. And surfing had started to creep its way in at that point. And I wanted to pursue that. I wanted to surf. I wanted to make that, something real and something big in my life. And I did. But then I got diagnosed with a heart condition called supraventricular tachycardia. So I was 16. I was diagnosed with this thing called SVT. And I would experience these really intense arrhythmias, right? So I would be on the footy field, or I'd be out surfing, and I'd get these really rapid heartbeat, and I would get really faint, and my arms would go really tingly and all this sort of stuff. So that's not an ideal situation, right? Yeah. So long story short, I went to the cardiologist, and they hooked me up to all these little batteries and a portable ECG monitor, and said, okay, we know what that is. The only way that we can potentially correct this situation is for you to undergo an ablation. Now, an ablation is where they wanted to enter my heart via the groin or go through under my arm and burn away a piece of the heart. They wanted to burn the sinoatrial node, which is responsible for the electrical communication between the four chambers of the heart. And I said, well, why do we want to destroy the thing that's not working? Can't we just fix it? And he said, well, this is the only option. And luckily we knew someone at that time who had the procedure done, could no longer exercise, could, barely walk down the street. And I thought, that's not me. I have to keep surfing. That was my big why. So very early on, I realized that, my goals were always going to change, but I had to live a life that was in alignment with, I guess, what I felt to be me. Truly me, an authentic expression of who I was. So I've always strived to do that, and it's changed over the years. But I think that having that as my true north and not being scared to adjust and change has enabled me to
hold on to that initially, and to go and find your own process through or against what you might have been told the right ways to do.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like I was 16 and the doctor was saying, the cardiologist was saying, this is how you fix your heart condition. There's no other way to fix it. And I actually went down a different path. I ended up meeting a naturopath and working with her for the next 8 years in a mentorship role. And she was able to teach me in a very short amount of time some really basic health principles, which totally changed things around. Now I was able to reverse and now still manage that condition just using diet, lifestyle, a little bit of supplementation within about 18 months. Yeah, so it was pretty powerful stuff, and that sparked off this big interest in health and well-being that's lasted, a decade and a couple of years.
Yeah, and the gut is obviously an area that I feel like has really grown in research in the past 5 to 10 years itself. What was it about the gut in particular that you were like, okay, yeah, I want to make a documentary about this?
I mean, it was pretty early. I obviously, when I was 16, that was 12 years ago. So that was pretty early days. This was before you could just walk down to Woolies and grab a kombucha or some Loving Earth chocolate. This is before raw food became a thing. So
it's worth the choice now sometimes.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Loving Earth.
Too much.
So it was, as much as it was hard to find this information, I had some good people around me, some good mentors, and they pointed me in the right direction. And I could not go very far without finding a lot of references to things like probiotics, to gut health, to cultured vegetables. Where I was like, what? Why are these vegetables more sophisticated than other vegetables? They're cultured. I was like, what is happening there? So I went off and did a little bit of research and ended up, I guess, becoming quite an authority in that area, in the sense that I was that middleman between the science that was going on and the everyday person. So obviously I was lucky enough to be able to communicate those potentially tricky ideas and tricky terminology. That vernacular in the microbiology space is very different to the vernacular that you and I would just read in a book or something like that. So I sort of adopted that middleman space, and then that ended up with me speaking on stage about it and doing workshops and and then writing a book. And then once we had done all that, it was like, okay, well, I think there's enough here to tell a film, to share a story through film. And I had worked at Totally Wild during that time for 2 years. So I'd done a lot of producing and writing and reporting and sort of blended all that together into my first feature, the Gut Movie.
So was it quite a big thing though for you to kind of delve that into your own passion project, or do you feel like because it was such a gradual thing over the years, everything just kind of fell into place?
I mean, it did ideologically, but financially, no. It was such a big step. And, I've nearly bankrupted myself twice now. And it's just like, why do you do it? But there's got to be a big thirst there. So even though I feel like we did it strategically, and it was sort of gung-ho, we did it without funding or anything like that. I still wouldn't recommend doing it.
It's kind of the journey of entrepreneurship, isn't it?
Yeah. Easy to look back on.
But when the passion's behind it, I guess it doesn't always feel like, until the hit really hits, and sometimes maybe it does, but you can kind of always find the purpose through it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, it's the passion can be there for a certain part of the project, but you're not going to have the passion for the entire thing. Like me sitting down for 4 weeks straight in the edit booth is very different to me walking around in Namibia with some local tribesmen and trying to hunt down an elk. It's an impala. It's very, very different. So I think, as you would know, Tess, you need to wear a lot of different hats when you're running your own shop, and it's that, I think, which builds a really strong character.
So when you were in Namibia, did you feel like you found what you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of we set it up so that we were searching for the optimal microbiome, right? But
Yeah.
in the end, I would say I realized that there is no optimal microbiome, and it's different for every single person because our immune systems are different. And if we delve into that, it's because where we are born, how we are born, the foods we're brought up on have a major influence on the development of that inner ecology. And if we try and mess with it when we're older in this attainment or this intangible attainment of this perfect microbiome, we may actually be doing ourselves more harm than good. So in a sense, I think the more I learned, the more I realized how little I knew and how much more there was to know. Even someone like Professor Thomas Barodi, who pioneered FMT procedures, fecal microbiota transplantations, he says, like, I asked him, and I was sitting in his office, and I was overwhelmed because this guy's like a pioneer, right? He's like top echelon gut health expert. And I said, how much do we know about the microbiome? He said less than 1%. And I was like, oh, a little bit early to be making a film. But yeah, I think regardless of that, we told a good story. And I think one of the big things that we I guess shared in the film was that you are in control of your microbiome. It's a long-term game. It's not some short-term like 1, 2, 3 in your life. So it's yeah, and you can change your microbiome very quickly. It's totally in your hands.
Yeah, I was so surprised when I watched it that your microbiome had changed so quickly, and I think it was under 7 days, and there was such a diverse range when we showed on that scale. Can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so I guess it's almost very difficult to determine or put a measurement on what a healthy microbiome is. The most consistent measurement that we use is diversity. How diverse is your microbiome? That tends to be a strong indicator of health, of microbiome health. So we use that, and I had a relatively low diversity before I'd left, even though I'd done all this work on my own microbiome. I'd done all this, sort of gut healing stuff. I still had some issues, and I had taken a lot of antibiotics when I was younger. So it's probably almost no surprise that I had some diversity issues. Now, it's also no surprise that when I went to Africa, went to Namibia, I was able to pick up so many new microbes. These are microbiota that would not have existed back here in Sydney. So picking those up naturally increased my diversity quite quickly. But whether those bacteria actually lasted and were transient or not was probably left a little bit unknown. But the main point, like you were saying, is that you can change your microbiome so rapidly. And we can do this through diet. We can do this through lifestyle. We can do this through simply engaging with nature. Going for a surf is going to change your microbiome. So there's lots of different ways we can do it. But that also means that a lot of people like to set themselves up to have this great microbiome, right? So they're like, I'm going to do a poo test. I'm going to get my poo tested. I'm going to see what's in my microbiome. So they're like, okay, well, I better detox for the week leading up to the test.
Yes.
And then I'll send it off. But then afterwards, when it comes back and it says it's relatively good, oh, you must be eating a lot of vegetables, then I'll go back to what I was eating. I would sooner you be 80% perfect for the rest of your life as opposed to 100% perfect for 12 weeks.
Yeah, and I feel like it creates a bit of hope as well, because I think a lot of people or friends that I know have suffered a lot of their own gut issues and whatnot. And so this kind of makes them feel like things are reversible. You can change things. And sometimes things, to see maybe physical results or whatever your ailments are, it takes a little bit longer, but it's all there. The body is there to want to heal itself and adapt and work with itself.
I think there's a natural tendency towards homeostasis for the human body. It wants to be there. It wants to be in balance. We just have to give it the right raw materials to get there, because without them, it can't do it.
So then you went on to make the longevity film, which is where you kind of went to a few of the blue zones, which are the areas that have kind of the longest life expectancy and the least amount of disease. What triggered you to begin that journey?
Yeah, I mean, not every 27-year-old is thinking about living to 100. But I think
Thinking
it was a
ahead, I
natural
like it.
yeah, I know. It was a natural extension of what I was doing because the microbiome is so micro, right? It's zoomed in. Everything is zoomed in, microscopic, blah blah blah. I wanted to go more macro because I knew that there were people in the world who had fantastic health and well-being who were not necessarily drinking kombucha or taking probiotics. And I thought, okay, there's got to be a little bit of story to tell there. And that's when I started looking at the Blue Zone research that Nat Geo and Dan Buettner really pioneered in the early 2000s. And this is looking, basically they identified 5 different communities around the world, quite small communities where people were living, you know, on average about 10 years longer than everybody else in the world. So it's quite a significant difference. They're living with a fraction of the disease that we experience everywhere else. Their overall happiness is very, very high. They're essentially living these ideal lives, these idealistic lives that we would previously sort of delegate to, you know, books and fantasy. So I thought, okay, I've got to go and visit some of these places. So I went and visited Okinawa in Japan, Loma Linda in California, of all places, and Ikaria in Greece, an island in Greece, and learned some pretty interesting things.
So what do you think were some of the biggest lessons that we could learn from them?
Yeah, I think when I went, I'm going to preface this. When I went, I was still micro. I'm not going to lie. I didn't really develop that perspective until later. There were 4 main areas that really challenged me. Actually, there were only a couple that really challenged me. Of course, nutrition was a big part of what they were doing. They're all eating a very whole foods diet, not necessarily paleo, not necessarily vegan, just eating healthily. Did it grow in the ground once? Did it run around once? Have they done much to it since? You know, really basic sort of food. Very consistent food, and a lot of them, 4 out of the 5 blue zones actually grow their own, aside from Loma Linda. Their movement practices were very natural. So what these people do is they don't necessarily go to the gym and smash out a bunch of exercises, but what they do is they have movement inherently built into their lifestyle. So they live in these geographical areas that have a lot of stairs, for instance. They have reasons to walk down the street every day. They never let themselves become too immobile. And that's generally just built into their life. So movement was a massive factor. Then, of course, we had community, and community was huge. And this is probably something that challenged me more so because it was kind of like in the pursuit of all these different areas like nutrition, like movement and all these different things, trying to achieve, I guess, the optimal way to live. I had at times sacrificed this community piece, and that was turned out to be quite an integral piece of the puzzle. So that was a big one for me. And then, of course, we noticed there was this big mindset, this very tangible mindset that these people had in the blue zones, especially the graceful ages, the elderly people. They had this very cheeky, affable, like smugness that you just wanted to hang around. You wanted to be around them. You wanted to chat with them and party with them. And I did. And I ended up dancing with, you know, these old Icarians all night long at an Icarian panagidi at the end of the film. And it was just this incredible experience. And it still now drives a lot of my behavior today, a year later.
And I think from some of my own personal research that I had done on blue zones, it was that their way that they look at age is kind of reverse to how we do. So when you age in these areas, it's kind of looked at as you're the one to be respected, you're the one to give the love, or a lot of love is given to you because you're teaching the wisdom downwards, and it's actually looked up to get older. Whereas I feel like in more of the main Western societies, it's like as you get older, well, that's not the ideal place you want to be, because then you have to retire and, you know, you're on the way to the nursing home, and it's completely reversed. And so I think when more of this purpose is given to you as you get older, your desire to live longer is grown, you know, and that's a big part of it, I would say.
It's massive. And a lot of people since coming back, a lot of the experts that I spoke to for the film have said one of the worst things that we allow our elderly population to do is retire, because they sort of often retire to nothing, right? There's no sort of purpose, because, you know, our children move away, they move far further than down the street. There's a saying in Okinawa that the children and the parents should live close enough so that they can walk a bowl of soup across them without it getting cold. So not too close, but like close enough. You know?
Just a little bit of
yeah. So there's a lot of like multi-level living with these communities, and it's just a really tight place where loneliness, where depression, where this lack of purpose just does not arise. And that's something that I think, you know, the current situation is sort of totally ignited and perhaps put a flame to is our loneliness levels here in not just Australia but the West in general. It's now at epidemic proportions. If I chatted with Dr. Ali Walker about this in the film, and she was saying how it's now being considered to be worse. Loneliness is considered to be worse than smoking, obesity, and substance abuse. Like, this should be headline news, but it's that thing, isn't it? It's like loneliness. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to say, hey, I'm lonely, because now instead of talking with people, we actually just go to the phone and say, hey, how is this going to temporarily alleviate my feelings of loneliness? Instead of in these blue zones, they would probably reach out to someone, not even over the phone, they would walk down the street and go and chat with them. So it's quite a significant difference how we sort of operate here. And that for me was the biggest thing, you know, and I sort of realized that me sitting alone in the corner drinking my green smoothie might have been actually worse than if I just went over and had a beer with a couple of mates. You know, there's something very tangible that we get from interacting with people. And this is shown when we just when we read how people react to a phone call instead of a text message, for instance. There's a much more positive physiological reaction and mental reaction when we actually receive that phone call, or when we look at someone in the eyes and we speak to them face to face and hear the timbre of their voice. It's very different to how we interact with them online. And this current climate, I think, has just made everything worse, and people are, you know, attacking each other. There's just totally lost this sense of community, and that's something that I think needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, can be such a divide sometimes right now, with different opinions and things flying around. And then, of course, with the social distancing, I think it's a big reminder that, you know, we just have to keep checking in with each other as much as we can. These times are, as you said, like highlighting all of it. I was quite staggered when I heard that in the longevity film that loneliness is kind of worse than obesity for us, and poor nutrition. So I think that's a really big take home for a lot of us to think about. And when you finished filming, did you say that you felt like you had quite a big shift of career and mindset?
Huge. Yeah. So I mean, I started off it was, like I said to you, it was like I was literally shortening my life trying to share these big stories that I hoped to change the world with. And I guess, you know, that was all put into perspective when I got back from these experiences, and it was not an easy decision, but it was definitely, I think, an impending one, where I sort of took a big step back from, you know, the health and wellbeing space and where it was going, and ended up, you know, committing a lot more time to surfing, and, you know, eventually building that up into a career in, I guess, a pretty short amount of time, which was pretty cool. And then looking at, you know, some other fictional projects, which has always been a big passion of mine. And I guess that just realizing that I don't need to save the world. I don't need to put myself in this position where I'm trying to save the world or anything like that. And it's probably quite pompous of me to think that I can. But just really living in a way that was more in alignment. Again, going back to that original sort of conversation, going back to living in a way that was more in alignment with who I was, and in alignment with me becoming the best version of me, not just like financially, but also mentally, physically, and just looking after myself. And in order to do that, I just had to take a step back. And I don't know, I truly don't know if this would have been possible if I was working 9 to 5 for someone else. Like, that was, and that concerns me, because so many people are in that situation. I look at my parents who have worked 9 to 5 for someone else for the last 40 years or whatever it is. And I sort of go, they couldn't have made these changes. So I think that the main takeaway needs to be that we need to build this healthy lifestyle. We need to make it inherent in our current schedule, in our current program. So how do you then squeeze in or make it easy for you to choose the healthy food, for you to choose the healthy behavior, for you to be surrounded with good people who support you and who you support in return, and to develop this cheeky, affable, laugh it off kind of attitude that a lot of these graceful ages have.
Well, I think that's one thing that at least this year has allowed us to do, is that we have had a moment to just slow down and actually check in with ourselves and be like, all right, what wasn't working? What can I do differently? How can I still be productive, but maybe actually allow myself to have more of that time to do these things and to focus on some of my personal things? And for you, I think the way you go about everything, regardless of whether you're making documentaries or not, or whatever you're promoting or speaking about, you seem to be always leading by example. And I think that's the best we can do if we're living our best version of ourselves. And if we share it as well, or just share it with our friends, that's then encouraging other people to do the same and hold that space. So I think it's amazing. And even like before I jumped on your Instagram, and I noticed that you had done a little interview with some of the people from the Blue Zones over the pandemic, which was absolutely gorgeous. And I think everyone should watch it. But the biggest take home that I got from it is how that they have remained so positive throughout it. And I kind of really agreed with you that I had gone through moments where I had found myself getting worked up about certain political issues or pandemic issues, and finding myself getting agitated, frustrated, angry, and not really knowing what to do with it. And then after watching this, reflecting a bit again, it was like, okay, let's look at where to channel that and how to sit back and witness, and also realize that everyone is in it. And just hearing these beautiful people speak about how they've gone about it in their little communities and what they've done, it was really inspiring.
I mean, that's great. And for you to go through that as well, I think a lot of people have gone through that, and for you to come out around full circle and sort of share that experience, I think is fantastic. And like you said, if there are people out there who are living by example and really sort of driving home, hopefully, a positive message, like certainly you are, then hopefully we are inching, perhaps, centimetering, but towards a better world. And I know it sounds cheesy, I know it sounds esoteric and it's sort of cliche, but what else can we do but sort of live our lives and try and leave this place better than when we came into it?
Totally, could not agree more. So I guess I'd love to know, now that you've done all of your own research over these and stuff, what does a plate in a day look like for you? Or a day, what's your optimal day? How are you finding that real balance in your life these days?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of surfing going on. Like I said, it's been a crazy good winter, so it's actually been almost a little blessing to be locked in New South Wales. Yeah. So that's been excellent. And it has just been this wavering balance. It's wavering sort of schedule between committing to my fictional pursuits and then also working on the YouTube and sort of all that sort of stuff that people know me for, but then spending a lot of time as well just working on some other projects. We've been doing a big van conversion. We're actually moving into a van permanently and sort of living in that and driving up and down the coast when we're allowed to. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, just to chase that lifestyle that I think I discovered in the Blue Zones. So that's all been taking a lot of time, but and you know what? I will say that I've been challenged again and again. I'm about as handy as a foot. So I don't know how to build stuff, and learning this process has been pretty humbling, to say the least, and it's challenged me in so many different ways. But finding anchors throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout a few months at a time, to come back to just sitting down, putting things into perspective. Hey, I'm pretty lucky. I'm a lot luckier than a lot of other people. I think has been really important as well. And people find that in different ways. I often find it through surfing, and then also just a bit of gratitude. you know, and some people find it through meditation, and certainly I've used meditation in the past to achieve that as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a difference, but today it was like a mixture of surfing, doing some writing for a important pitch document, and then sitting down and have a chat with you.
I love it. You know what? You're very inspiring, Kale. I love it. I was having this discussion with my girlfriend last night. We were like, this has really made us miss traveling, but also realize that we want to experience life, and it is easy to get trapped into the normal 9 to 5, or there's expectations of more in the Western society expectations. But life is there to be lived, and I think what you're doing with the van is amazing. And I think a lot of people now after this year will be like ready to go out there and see the world and attack it, because that's why we're here, to experience this beautiful world that we have been gifted with, you know?
I think so. I mean, I totally agree, and yeah, I'll throw it back at you. I think you're doing an incredible job, and using this platform very consciously, which is a rare thing. So thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for joining me. It's been so great to pick your brain and have a chat.
Yeah, it has been great.
I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, back at you. Hopefully, post lockdown world, we'll be able to catch up for a coffee and
green
chew the fat. Yeah, green smoothie.